listening, keep learning. The Tom Daniels Show. Keep listening, keep learning. The Tom Daniels Show. Take a break from your usual routine and tune in to the Tom Daniels Show.
You're listening to the Tom Daniels Show, and I'm your host, Tom Daniel. Today, I want to examine music not just as sound, but as structure this time. Something built, maintained, and occasionally misunderstood. Now, this episode is about a simple idea that organizations, institutions, and musical groups alike have struggled with for as long as people have worked together. The belief that anyone can be replaced. Wait. What is that? Do y'all hear that? Oh, man. That's Mary Mac making a little joke. All right, stop with the funeral music. Now, in a strictly technical sense, people are replaced every day. I mean, chairs are filled, podiums are occupied. The music begins at the appointed hour. But the more interesting question is not whether a person can be replaced. It's whether the thing itself remains the same once they're gone. All right, now cut that out. History offers us a rather uncomfortable answer to that question, because sometimes the machine continues to run, but it's no longer the same machine. Rip. And nowhere is that more clearly documented than in music. Let's begin with a distinction that's rarely made but absolutely essential. In any musical organization, whether a band, an orchestra, or a long-standing ensemble, there are really three kinds of roles. First, there's the functional role. Now, these are positions that require competence, training, reliability. A skilled musician steps in, learns the material, and performs it well. Then there are stylistic roles. These are a little more complicated. A replacement may be technically proficient, but must also understand phrasing, tone, interpretation, the aesthetic, unwritten aspects of performance. But there's a third category, the most dangerous category, structural roles. These are not simply positions. They are organizing forces. They determine how decisions are made, how sound is shaped, how identity is maintained. They provide a soul for the performing group. And when a structural role is removed or changed, something subtle but irreversible always occurs. Now, the group doesn't necessarily collapse. It just becomes something else. Now, before we take a look at some examples, I want to acknowledge something significant. I mean, without Diana Ross, there are no Supremes. Without Beyoncé, there is no Destiny's Child. These are the obvious examples. I want to look at some that are a little more different. Consider the Beach Boys. Now, to the casual listener, they're just a harmony group. Surf songs, California imagery, nostalgia, and four-part harmony. But that description misses the central fact. The Beach Boys were, in their most important years, a highly creative force dominated by just one man, Brian Wilson. Brian Wilson was not just a songwriter. He was the architect. He was the Beach Boys. He determined all the harmonic language, the studio techniques they used, the emotional tone, what the music was allowed to be. That was all Brian Wilson. And when he stepped back from active leadership in the late 60s, well, the band didn't disappear. I mean, they kept touring, they kept recording, but they didn't evolve. They lost all of their forward momentum, and they drifted. The Beach Boys only had one hit song after Brian Wilson, and that was Kokomo in 1988. Their catalog is very recognizable. The identity did not remain recognizable. They're a group that preserved their sound long after they lost their voice. Now let's consider Chicago. Now, in its early form, Chicago was not a soft, sappy pop band. Oh, they were a rock band. They were aggressive, rhythmically complex, and at times kind of unruly. And at the center of that sound was Terry Kath, guitarist of extraordinary expressive range. When Terry Kath died in 1978, Chicago continued on successfully. In fact, one could even argue that they got more successful. But if you listen closely, you'll hear the shift. The danger to their music is gone. The improvisational edge is gone. The music becomes smoother, more controlled, more predictable. And Chicago went from being dangerous to being safe. That's not failure. It's just substitution. Edge replaced by polish. That's why commercial success is not evidence of artistic continuity. And now let's turn to Styx. Few bands illustrate internal tension more clearly than Styx. At the center of that tension was Dennis DeYoung, a songwriter whose theatrical instincts often placed him at odds with the rest of the band. Difficult? Oh, yeah. By almost every account, yes. Indispensable? Also, yes. He was a pain in the butt, but he was the pain in the butt holding the whole thing together. Because Dennis DeYoung was not simply contributing songs, he was shaping the narrative identity of the band. Albums like Paradise Theater, that's not just a collection of songs. That's a constructed experience. And when DeYoung was pushed out of the band, Styx continued touring and continued recording and selling tickets and selling albums. But the conceptual cohesion, the sense that the band was building something, disappeared. The most difficult person in the room is sometimes the one holding the whole thing together. You're listening to The Tom Daniels Show, and we'll be right back.
Keep listening, keep learning. The Tom Daniels Show. What are you waiting for? The Tom Daniels Show. What are you waiting for? The Tom Daniels Show. What are you waiting for? The Tom Daniels Show.
Welcome back to The Tom Daniels Show, and this show would absolutely stop functioning without Mary Mac, the world's most perfect band. Now, consider Creedence Clearwater Revival. Now, by the early 70s, tensions within the band led to a decision that, on the surface, seemed entirely reasonable at the time: a more democratic approach to songwriting. Now, the four members of Creedence included the Fogerty brothers, Tom and John. John Fogerty was the face and voice of Creedence. After Tom Fogerty, his brother, left the band, the remaining members agreed to share creative responsibility, and what followed was the album Mardi Gras. It is, by most critical accounts, and by the admission of John Fogerty himself, a terrible mistake. Not because the musicians lacked ability, good grief, they were loaded with talent, but because the system misunderstood its own structure. Creedence was not a democracy. It was a centralized creative engine driven by John Fogerty. He was the face of Creedence. He was the voice of Creedence. Fairness doesn't guarantee effectiveness, and this is a classic case of the cure being worse than the disease. Now let's consider the Eagles. Few bands have maintained such a powerful and enduring catalog than the Eagles, and few have so clearly demonstrated what happens when a group transitions from creation to preservation. After the dismissal of Don Felder, a key contributor to Hotel California, the Eagles continued as a touring entity of extraordinary precision. The performances are immaculate, the sound is faithful, the audience is satisfied. But new material of comparable impact does not emerge, not without Don Felder. Something essential changed. The band became a curator of its own museum rather than a creator of its future. There's a difference between maintaining excellence and generating excellence. Now consider Earth, Wind, and Fire. Few groups in American music have achieved such a seamless fusion of precision and exuberance. Horn arrangements that move with architectural clarity, rhythm sections that lock with rigidity and groove, and vocal lines that balance power with restraint. And at the center of all of that was Maurice White. Maurice White was not merely the band leader. He was the organizing intelligence behind the whole sound. He shaped the arrangements, controlled dynamics, maintained the balance between complexity and accessibility that defined the group's whole identity. When illness forced him to step back from active leadership in the 90s, Earth, Wind, and Fire didn't falter in any obvious way. The performances remained polished without him. The musicianship remained high. The catalog remained intact. But something essential had changed. What you hear in later performances of Earth, Wind, and Fire is not the absence of skill, it's the absence of structure. The sound is preserved. The vision is not being actively constructed. And this gives us yet another example. A great organization can maintain excellence long after it's stopped generating excellence. And finally, let's consider Sly and the Family Stone. Now, at their peak, they were simply not a band. They were a complete rethinking of what a rhythm section could do. Interlocking parts, elastic groove, voices were treated like rhythmic instruments as much as melodic ones. All of it held together by one person, Sly Stone. Stone controlled the architecture of the groove itself. He determined how parts entered, how they collided, how they resolved. The music felt spontaneous, but it was anything but spontaneous. When Sly Stone withdrew from consistent leadership in the early 70s, the group didn't formally replace him. They just attempted something more subtle. They tried to continue without him. And what followed is one of the clearest examples in modern music of what happens when a structural center totally disappears. The performances were much less cohesive. The recordings lose focus. The internal logic of the music unravels totally. Because what had been mistaken for a collective was, in fact, a system held together by one single organizing force. And when that force was removed, there was nothing to replace it. Only something to continue without. Now, at this point, the pattern really should be clear. Organizations are very good at identifying what can be measured: technical proficiency, reliability, consistency. But they're a lot less effective at recognizing what cannot be easily quantified, such as creative direction, conceptual unity, and the subtle authority that determines how decisions are made. These things are not visible on resumes and curriculum vitas. They do not appear in audition rooms, and yet they're often the very things that hold an organization together. You remove them, everything still functions, keeps right on going. The rehearsals continue, the performances proceed, but the identity, the thing that made the organization distinct, quietly begins to dissolve. So, can people be replaced? Well, yeah, of course they can. History demonstrates this with remarkable consistency. But history also demonstrates something else, something far less comfortable. Not every role is interchangeable. Not every contribution is visible. Not every form of value can be replicated. Sometimes the removal of a single individual doesn't cause collapse. It just causes transformation, and not always for the better. Oh, the machine continues to run. The sound continues to be heard. But the structure, the unseen architecture that gave it meaning, changes. And once it changes, it never comes back. This has been the Tom Daniels Show. Keep listening. Keep learning.
Keep listening, keep learning. The Tom Daniels Show. Keep listening, keep learning. The Tom Daniels Show. Take a break from your usual routine and tune in to the Tom Daniels Show. You'll discover the world of melodies and stories that you might not know. Keep listening, keep learning. The Tom Daniels Show. Keep listening, keep learning. The Tom Daniels Show. What are you waiting for? The Tom Daniels Show. What are you waiting for? The Tom Daniels Show. What are you waiting for? The Tom Daniels Show.